Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. Today, I'm excited to welcome back Adam Spiegel of the Sonoma Distillery Company, Distilling Company. I always get those
Right.
confused. Sonoma whiskey, Sonoma bourbon and rye. We're here to taste their core line as well as some of their R&D stuff, some of their higher end stuff, and we even have a sample of a maple bourbon that hand labeled for us. So thank you so much for that, Adam, Stacy. We appreciate your help on this. We're excited today. So I see a couple of familiar faces, and I see some new ones as well. Welcome. If you're here for the first time, welcome. Thanks for joining us. The way we run these tastings is we're here to have fun. We're here to ask questions. We're here to get nerdy. So participate in the conversation. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Toss it in the chat, what have you. All we ask is that if you're not actively participating, just keep yourself on mute so we don't have background noise and we're not talking over each other. Other than that, have fun, ask questions. That's what we're all here for. We're here to learn and taste new stuff. All that said, we're super excited to dive into this. We haven't seen Adam in a couple of years. Last time we tasted the core bourbon and rye. This time we're starting with the cherry wood smoke stuff. And the cherry wood smoke is, you were the first one to introduce us to that. So I'm looking forward to you explaining this process. Because when I talk about Sonoma, that's the first thing I mentioned, right? That's kind of, to me, you put that on the map. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about Sonoma. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. And honestly, being a craft distiller in the state of California has been a really exciting thing. I started my business up in 2010. So a little earlier than most. I always tell people we're sort of the old guard, though we're still fairly young. We started our business up. We're the 15th distillery in California, full-fledged DSP. Now there's close to about 270. So since 2010, I would say sort of the moss has sort of grown around us. Within the first 200 United States, and now we're close to 2,700, 2,800 throughout the whole United States. So it's been cool to see, the sort of the growth of distilleries, and not just in the state, but also in the country. And what's unique about us is that I sort of stayed focused on making whiskey from day one. A lot of people I know sort of dived into the vodkas and gins and rums, and what you got to do what you got to do to keep the lights on. And I think because we've been sort of myopically focused on just trying to make whiskey and really try to make good whiskey, I think we've taken a little bit of a longer approach to it. I think we've been okay with a slower growth curve on our releases. And I think, to those who've tried our stuff before, I mean, Jim, as someone who already mentioned, he tried our stuff before, it's like we have come a long way and we're continuing to grow and change and evolve. And I really like the direction we're taking today. It's not just me. I've got a staff, Stacy, our marketing manager, is on the call, but then we've got a staff of 16 now on the production, making our products 6 days a week. My little backstory, just to maybe for those who haven't heard it before, I was the fallout of the financial crisis. I lost my job in 2008. A little financial crisis hit, and I was a financial sales guy, and realized I had no tangible skills. I was like, I just don't know what to do. My joke has always been that there was a zombie apocalypse happening, and I don't know how to kill any zombies. What the heck am I going to do? And so, as I was standing there with my little moving box in my hand, and 600 people at this financial firm got let go, I was like, I gotta learn how to make something. I want to also control my own future. So I started making beer in a garage, because what do you do when you have plenty of time? So I started making beer in a garage. Beer kind of quickly turned into wine. Wine quickly turned into grappa, because you have leftover twigs and berries and spit. And so I started making some grappa for fun. And then I realized that all whiskey starts as a beer base. So we started taking some beer and putting it into a still and running it out. And then we started making mashes for after whiskey making. And we really felt, myself and an old business partner really felt like we were making something that was really unique and different, but there was really no roadmap on how to start a distillery. And so I called, Marco over at Charbet, and I called Lance at St. George. I even called my good friends over the Renzo family, Ralph Renzo over there at Hudson, who eventually connected me to his son Gable. May he rest in peace. But it was nice to be able to go and talk to some of these people who I still look up to today. I see them at trade shows, and I give them big hugs, and I thank them. And I've also tried to give back too. So when other distilleries that are small in the state of California came a knocking, I also answered their questions too. So what you're going to try today is, as Venom said, is not our core lineup per se. It's sort of the deviation from our normal lineup, because I think we make some stuff that's sort of like the critical utility bourbon, utility rye. But then I also think we make other things that I think are really worth really worth trying. I would actually suggest, if everybody's willing to let me maybe go a little off script here, I was actually going to suggest we start with the wheat, if everybody's open to maybe trying that one first. Pour yourself a little one finger pour. One of the things that's really unique about us and the way we make whiskey, not just because it's grain to glass using largely California grains, but because I use a traditional pot still. So in my facility, I've got a 3,000 gallon Scottish still that I've been running for about 2.5 years now. I started in a little 15 gallon still that became 125 gallon still that became 250 gallon stills, and then 4 250s, and now a 3,000. But I've been really sort of focused on making old school whiskey and good whiskey. And so I think a lot of techniques from both Scotland, obviously, in the equipment that I use, and some of the ethos. And you'll taste a little of that in this whiskey, because it lives in used barrels versus new barrels. So there's a lot of sort of Scottish influence on this one. But I also trained with a master distiller named Hubert Germain Robon. So for those who know the Germain Robon distillery that got bought by Gallo, they were sort of like the forefathers of American brandy. I worked with Hubert in 2013, 14, and 15. And so what I found working with him is how to balance whiskeys a little bit differently, how not to over oak my whiskeys, how I feel like a lot of American whiskeys just sort of go a little too long at the original entry proof. And then again, trying to find a balance between new char American oak barrels or used barrels. And so this whiskey, my wheat, call it California wheat, is made with California wheat, California winter wheat, 80% wheat, 20% rye malt. It lives for about 3 years in used bourbon and rye barrels. And then I finish it for a year in a used cognac cask. So I actually bought the old 25-year-old cognac cask from my mentor. And so when you go to try this whiskey, you should definitely taste notes of that really bready, beautiful sort of bouquet of wheat, sort of nice wheat bread, doughy wheat bread. But then you get that really nice sort of like raisiny fruit notes from the 25-year-old cognac cask. And so a really soft whiskey, sort of in a wine tasting style, kind of start with my softest and move into more aggressive on the whiskeys. But it has some really beautiful like saline saltiness to it too. Because we make everything on site, grain to glass, it really is unique to be able to have open top fermentations and sucking in all the that beautiful yeast that's been permeating our walls for the last decade plus of cooking. But it also allows us to have some of the salty brininess that comes in from the fog that settles in the Sonoma Valley. I should mention we're in Rohnert Park, so if you are driving north of the Golden Gate Bridge, we're an hour north of San Francisco. We get that fog that settles in the morning. It usually burns off by the middle of the day, and sometimes usually will settle back in the evening. So hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, but also brings a little bit of that Sonoma coast to our flavor profile. So if you taste it in there, I didn't put it in. It just happens to be part of the sort of, I guess, terroir or provenance of our whiskeys. But I think it's really something unique that we bring to the table. So cheers, everybody. Happy Friday. Little tasting this one. I've been tell people food pairing wise, and this one's like a bread pudding. I really like this with like a nice like blackened fish would do super well with this one, and some good braised veggies. I really enjoy it with like oysters and clams, or a good Chopino if anybody happens to be of that pursuit. Just because it does have that nice little saltiness and brininess to it too. I'd love to get your take on it as well. Questions, comments. But again, this is my lightest whiskey. If those who happen to like more like a Highland style Scotch, I think this one certainly plays nicely in that sort of effervescent, the sort of lighter whiskey flavor profile. Cool. Well, maybe I did my job right. I answered all the questions before.
Yeah. There's a graininess and like a mocha dark chocolate note on the end that I'm really enjoying. It's really interesting.
Yeah, wheat doesn't really get a lot of play. If you think about, obviously wheated bourbons, which are getting a ton of play, the Pappies and the Wellers and all that of the world, which I drink and love too. I think this one really plays nicely because it lets the wheat sort of come out. It doesn't over oak it because we're using the used barrels. If I did put into a new char barrel, I found that it just tasted like a wheated bourbon. So it's sort of outside of the style of like a Bernheim, which is like 51% wheat and that crap load of corn and some malted barley. This is really just meant to sort of showcase that like winter wheat flavor profile, that bready, that doughiness. You'll hear me tell lots of stories, but I grew up in San Francisco near a bakery, so I used to always love kind of walking to school and smelling that like doughy yeastiness, and so this one just really reminds me a lot of that.
Speaking of which, can you talk about the yeast you're using on this?
Sure. So we do sweet mashing for everything across the board. So that means we're using fresh yeast every single time. We have a sort of a house whiskey yeast that we've been working with for a decade plus at this point. It's the US1, the American whiskey yeast. The reason I like it is that it happens to sort of round out all the spirits, so it sort of tastes like they're all in the same family. And so that's one of the nice parts about doing that. But because we leave the top spiral fermentations open, and you usually add the lax today, there's a little bit of that little lactobacillus and Brettanomyces flavors that you get from an open top ferment. There is sort of a house signature, I think, that you just get by being fermented in the same facility as other things. And so, we do sweet mash on ours. We've always talked about maybe doing some sour mashing for fun, or maybe certain product types that are going to be of interest. It will be interesting to note, though we don't really tell the world this. We're probably the largest whiskey distillery in California, which is sort of hilarious because California is a big state and we're still relatively small. But whiskey focused and making whiskey day in and day out, I think we produce more gallons of whiskey than most. This year, we're on track to make about 150,000 gallons of whiskey. But the cool part is I've got a 24-inch column still coming in the next like 3-4 months. So I've always sort of touted this like really old school approach to making whiskey. And then now I'm going to have both. I'm going to have like the 3,000 gallon Scottish still. I'm going to have this 24-inch column still that can, if I turn that thing on 7 days a week, it could make 700,000 gallons a year if I wanted, 1 million gallons a year. So it'll be cool to have. I've always been such a geek on the Japanese style whiskeys, the Canadian style approach to stuff. And so blending together different things, either as 100% distillate or as different types of blends of different products, blending stuff that has some column influence and some pot distilled stuff, and then putting them together. So I think from us, you're going to find a distillery that continues to sort of evolve. But I think one of the things I'm really super excited about is just how we continue to just like amass these really cool tools that as a blender, I'm going to be 40 next year. I've been doing this now for 13 years, 15 years unprofessionally. It's been cool just to sort of see where our flavor profile has continued to evolve, and where I think the consumer is getting more and more educated and asking the really tough questions, which allows us to just raise the level of our game.
If you're at the beginning, you said there's over 200 distilleries in California. That's pretty crazy.
270, correct.
Wow. I mean, obviously they're not all making whiskey. There's a lot of vodka distilleries out there too.
Sure.
A lot of grappa, by the way. Grappa is my new love. I've been searching it out.
I love grappa. I mean, listen, there's different ways to approach making grappa, and just to sort of talk briefly about it. I haven't made grappa in years. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, so my free time is sort of now officially gone. But and you may hear them upstairs, so don't mind the pitter patter of my children screaming at my wife. So grappa is great. My wife always knows if we go to a great meal, I usually will order a grappa as my dessert, and that means that like it's sort of an unconscious thing that I like. Oh, that means Adam had a great meal. Great, cool. And it's just because it's really just sort of this fun, high alcoholic on the flavor profile product that really just sort of like cuts through like whatever sort of like beautiful, rich, fatty stuff you might have had during your meal. If it's not made when they add sugar back into it, it doesn't sort of retain a lot of those like diesel flavors that sometimes people get turned off of. They sort of always say like, oh, it smells like rubbing alcohol or like gasoline. And that's usually because like when people are trying to make more and more grappa, they usually will take the grape skins after a press and they'll put them into water, rehydrate up the skins, and they'll start adding sugar to it. And when you add sugar to it, you can certainly get more alcohol because it's going through another fermentation inside of your tank. But it makes the alcohol that is reminiscent of like more of a rum or more of like a super high alcoholic flavor profile. And so that's not my jam. And so if you go to places that are a bit more authentic and old school, I think you'll really, really find that they are great. So go rum, go grappa, and go rum too, I guess. Yeah, we can talk about that as well. But yeah. I'm taking some comments. I'm gonna go look in the comment section. Obviously, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them.
The number one question, I guess, is some people have 6 glasses in front of them and they like to go back and forth. Do you know the order you want to go in tonight?
Yeah. So what I would recommend, just because we're gonna kind of try and keep some of the smokier ones towards like the second half of this thing. I was gonna recommend maybe the wheat. I was gonna maybe recommend the maple bourbon. We'll talk about why we're working with that and maybe get some feedback from that on you all. Then I was gonna jump into the 2 smoked whiskeys. Though if this group's okay with some cask strength, we can actually jump into the single barrel as well, which I think. So let me start over. We're gonna do the California wheat. We'll do the maple. We'll do the cask strength single barrel, the total wine one. We'll do both of the smoked whiskeys, the cherrywood rye and the cherrywood smoked bourbon, and then we'll finish off with the black truffle.
Which one do you want to do first on the cherrywood smoked one? Are we doing the bourbon? Or
We'll do the rye. We'll probably do the rye first, and then we'll jump in. Because we're doing rye next, we'll actually do the cherrywood smoked bourbon first, and then we'll do the rye. Cool. Sorry. I think that's a good order. So next one is something a little bit more experimental. So the maple. Again, I would love to say that, you know, I try to think of everything, but like I was really, really impressed once when I tried the Hudson maple cask. It really sort of opened my eyes to the idea of like using a maple barrel as like a, you know, a sugar additive and flavor profile, and sort of pops this all up. And we actually forged a really good relationship with a maple producer out sort of the Midwest area. And they're the ones who usually provide a lot of like the barrel the barrel aged maple syrups they sell at Costco. So if you ever find all those ones out there, those are actually being made using real barrels. And of course, they now have these mapleized barrels that they sell into the open market. And so this is a sort of like total interest. Like, would love to get your feedback on it. It's not even ready yet. I mean, I just pulled it out of a cask that I really wanted to sort of get everybody's take on it. And it's still at like a relatively high proof. So just, you know, bear with me on that one. But, you know, the idea of taking a bourbon, which we make on site, you can make bourbon anywhere in America, blah, 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 blah. Ours is right now, that one is a wheated bourbon, 70% corn, 25% wheat, 5% malted barley, so 70, 25, 5. This has been resting for about a year, 8 months in a maple cask. And I think it's got another probably 6 months left in it too. We tried turning the barrel for you all, so it's like it's a nice homogenization of all the flavors, not just like me scooping off the top. But you know, the goal is, again, like all balance, like all the things I've always learned from a mentor, it's like just not to have it be too mapley, but like it really is meant to be a bit more desserty, a bit more sort of after drink. You know, especially because some cocktails already use maple syrup in them too. Like it could be a way to like not have to add a lot of that crap in and like just sort of let the whiskey sort of express itself. So again, I would love everybody's take on it too. I'm not sure if you've tried other maple cask finishes that you've liked. I'm always open to hearing that as well. But yeah, this is a whiskey that was aged out for 3, 4, and 5 years old. And then we blended together, and then we've been letting it, as I mentioned, rest for about 8 months and use maple cask. And again, this is a relationship we have. There are really no maple trees in California, so I can't necessarily say that this is like a purely California-esque product. But it is interesting to note that California consumes among the most maple syrup in the country, which I was unaware of. But as I got to know some maple syrup producers, it was a hot topic for them.
Well, our initials are the same as the #1 maple consumers and producers in the world. So CA,
Yeah, there you go. See?
I'll take my jokes out of here. I'll let myself out. Sorry. Eh?
Very, very sweet on the nose.
Mhm. Intentional, right? I mean, that's really what I wanted to target there, was something that just, it's when it's done, it's gonna really, you'll be able to taste the maple and taste the bourbon, and the two of them will play nicely together. You know, we'll probably end up releasing 250 to 500 cases on there, and we'll see how it goes.
Wow, I just realized I poured it for my sample and there's actually legitimate residual sugar on the side of the bottle. Sugar crystal on here. That's crazy.
Well, another motivation I've had too is if you ever buy like the Trader Joe's maple syrup, they come in these little cute flasks. And so oftentimes what I'll do is, like, if we're done with it at some point or it's been gifted to me, I'll usually take a little bit of those leftover bottles and just top it off with my favorite rye whiskey or bourbon. And then you just sort of let it sit there. And so let that little residual sugar that's left in the bottle never go to waste.
Yeah, do a couple of dashes of bitters and you got an old fashioned right there.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
is really good. So 51%, I'm assuming cast strength.
Yeah.
At cast strength, this is fantastic. I would be worried at 40% it would be too sweet, but I think it really carries through. You get some of that heat that it needs from the bourbon to really make it a well-rounded. I've had a few maple finished whiskeys which were great on first sip, but after like 2 sips, I'm like, look, that's just that's too much. This is possible for sure.
Yeah, steal all my ideas, Jane. I want you to take them all and do them. That's part of why I drink so much, is why I drink things and I know stuff I drink, so it helps. Besides butchering lines from Game of Thrones, I drink and I know things. Damn it. Okay. So unless there's any questions about that, I appreciate some feedback on. I've seen some of the chats on this, so. Obviously, we're going to probably end up releasing some of it this year. It'll definitely make its way to Southern California. As you know, while California is a gigantic state, Southern California is a huge consumer of whiskeys, huge consumer of our whiskeys. So really excited to get down there more. I think we're in the process of signing up for a couple of whiskey tastings, shows and stuff, and whiskey dinners down there. So look forward to letting you all know when we have some stuff going on in that area.
I do have a question, Adam, on this one. So first of all, really like it. I like the balance of it, not too sweet, but you can definitely taste the maple. So really, really nice. You mentioned you want to leave it a little longer, a few more months. Are you expecting it to get sweeter because of the maple in that barrel, or are you expecting it to get more wood notes, or a balance, or what are you expecting to get?
It's funny you ask. I think it's more about the maple and the wood coming together, which is actually what I'm trying to accomplish, and not necessarily the maple and the distillate coming together. The two of those I feel like have already homogenized really well. I learned a lot. One of the things we do that's really unique to us is that we use barrel-aged water to proof all of our spirit down. And so I learned this from my mentor in cognac. One of the things that Hubert, I say he's in cognac, he now lives in cognac, but one of the things that Hubert taught me is that, one of the things that Americans do is we shock our spirits when we proof it down with water, because we add water to it, and not just the flavors are percolating all over the place, but also you might get a little bit of saponification on there too. So one of the biggest things I'm always trying to sort of be careful of is, like, how do you homogenize the whiskey in the water early on? And so what I do is I take whiskey that's ready to go to bottle, that's perfectly good, ready to rock and roll. I pull it off, I proof it down between about 30-35% alcohol, and I rebarrel it again. And what that taught me a lot is like how water and distillate sort of come together, and really how you make this sort of like, it pulls a lot of those soft woody notes out of the barrel at such a low ABV that that's the water I use to proof it down from barrel strength to bottle strength. And so I've got thousands of gallons of water barrel aging. And actually, I think there's probably a history to that too. If you think about it, it's sort of a feast and famine situation with rain. A lot of times the cognac makers used to proof down with rainwater, and the rainwater will eventually spoil if you don't fortify it. So they fortified it with some of their brandies, put it back in barrel. When they're ready for it, they pulled it out and realized that process worked. And so that's something I sort of stole. I think it works really well for me. And I'm super stoked to see, again, now we're talking about maple, now that mapley woody goodness, like how those sort of more softer notes as it starts to extract out of there, how it will start to come together.
Awesome. Thank you.
To clarify the mash bill, 70% corn, 25% wheat, 5% malt barley. So 7-25-5. It's our in-house wheated bourbon mash bill that we use. So 70-25-5.
And what's the plan on this? Are you planning to bring it down in proof, or are you planning to keep it a cash down?
I'm going to bring it down in proof, but we typically proof our stuff in the 90s. I imagine this will probably be proofed on the higher side due to some of the more sugariness of it too. So my guess, if I had to throw a dart at the dartboard, is somewhere in the 95, 96 proof range, which I think will still end up balancing some of that those wood sugars and that sweetness out of the maple, but not overly sweetening the product by just having to be such a low ABV. So I think we're going to be probably in the mid 90s when we release this one. I shy away, outside of single barrels, I really shy away from releasing things at cask strength, because even though people maybe perhaps on the Zoom drink stuff at more cask strength more regularly, I think it's sometimes difficult for a newbie to try something and all of a sudden just be like firewater. So I think it's at 95, 96, you usually still retain a lot of that sort of like sophistication and roundness and beauty, for lack of a better word, but it doesn't necessarily water it back too much. So I imagine that's where this product's going to probably go in at, and probably end up doing that again sometime this year. I think we're getting close to it. So I think we're probably another 3 to 6 months. I'll probably end up pulling her now that she's hitting a year and see where it goes.
Yeah, that's the thing. The proof needs to battle the sweetness, in my opinion. But you're at 96, and cask strength's 102. Might as well say, let's save yourself the trouble. But I do understand that I'm not speaking for 98% of consumers. Most people want stuff at 90. You're right.
Well, it's interesting too. Yeah. So you talk about proofs, right? So this one, we proofed it down to less such a low ABV because our thought was when it's going to extract the maple, it's going to be better at the lower, more pre-prohibition style approach to barreling. And you should be aware that we lower at a lower ABV today than I did 5 years ago than a lot of other people do throughout the country. So our normal go to barrel ABVs for our products these days, for our bourbons, our rye whiskeys, our smoked whiskeys, are somewhere between 108 and 110 proof. So we sort of subscribe to a lot of the same stuff that like Wilderness Trail subscribes to a bunch of other distilleries now. I guess Leopold Brothers, where we figured that there's less volatiles in the whiskey as you go slightly lower on the ABV. It lets the whiskey and the barrel homogenize at a less sort of like static and crazy way. And we found that the whiskeys are just actually sometimes faster at 108 to 110 proof. We're not trying to maximize our barrel rooms because we're still relatively small. I mean, we're at 43,000 square feet and growing, but it's our goal is not to do stuff for the financial reasons, but do stuff for flavor. It's kind of our big one.
And I did want to ask you. You mentioned that you're the biggest whiskey producer in the state. Where is all that whiskey going? Are you doing any contract distilling, or is everything going out in your bottle?
Yeah. So we're doing work for ourselves, laying down Sonoma whiskeys. I'm excited to say that most likely this year, and maybe this will be a good opportunity for us to say hi again. We're launching a brand that I've been working on for about 3 years called Old Quaker. It used to exist. It originally started in the early 1900s, sort of died off in the 1970s. Corning and Company, which is our company name today. Sonoma Distilling is one of our brands. Corning and Company was my business partner's great grandfather's distillery in Peoria, Illinois. And so we took that name a couple of years ago, sort of during COVID, quietly. We have really big shoes to fill because Corning and Company actually was the largest whiskey distillery in the country, let alone parts of the world, in the early 1900s, and then it closed down and it actually got bought by Seagram and all that stuff. So we, as a distillery, are bringing back one of the brands that was in that book, which is Old Quaker. And so I have three new products coming out: an Old Quaker bourbon, rye, and an American whiskey. Those will be released this year. And I bring all this up because I think as we are producing, we're producing not just for that, we're producing for Old Quaker. I've been making a lot of soju. I've got a soju client out of Korea, and we're making 70,000 gallons of soju. So like almost half my production is going to Korea right now, which is a bit scary sometimes because you're putting about half your eggs in one basket. But the Koreans seem to have liked the soju we've been making over the last year. So perhaps we can try that too if you're all interested. We have some barrel-aged soju that's pretty delicious too. And then we've been making Old Potrero for the last couple of years. So for those who I'm sure I'm allowed to say it now because Hodling's been releasing that information, but a couple of years ago they lost their home, and so we've been working with Bruce, Master Distiller Bruce over at Hodling, and actually making the new make that goes into Old Potrero at our facility. And so actually I'm also housing all their barrels too. So it's been really a cool partnership for us because they need a home for their whiskey, and we need to learn from great master distillers and blenders and people. And so it's been really, really cool to do that too. So if you like Old Potrero, you'll be tasting some distillate in the next probably 3 or 4 years from now. You'll be tasting some of the stuff we've been making in our facility, which I think, having tasted the White Dog of 5 years ago to today, it actually is pretty dead on.
So are they guest distilling at your facility?
Yeah, so we worked with them. We've learned their cut regimen. They come in and still do QC checks on us all the time, and we've been producing it for them for the last couple of years.
Amazing. We actually have Old Potrero on the calendar for later this summer.
Great.
That's a nice segue. I'm excited.
They're great. That stuff's awesome. And again, when I first started, that's another one of the old timers who taught me a lot. Obviously Fritz Maytag, who started them up, and then their master distiller Bruce has been there for 3 decades almost. I mean, it's been really cool to learn from him. Only recently have I sort of taken on that master distiller title. It's something I've been sort of fighting for a long time, but having been doing this for about 13 years and now making a variety of different types of things, whether it be some gins and vodkas and whiskeys for other people's brands. I really feel like it's been great to just continue to learn from people who I respect in this industry. So that's been really cool.
We just did a quick poll, and it's unanimous. We want to try your soju because I've never had.
Cool. I think it'd be cool to get your take on it. It uses California rice, which I'm not sure if anybody knows, but California grows some of the best rice in the world. Even the Japanese find it acceptable, which and it actually means it's even better than most. But so we our mash bill on that's like 90% rice, 10% malted barley, and it doesn't utilize the koji or anything, or sort of the traditional style of soju, but we do use our cut regimen is very, very traditional, and we also put a lot of the feints back into the wash before we rerun it again, which is a very traditional technique. So it doesn't, the yields don't go up by doing that, but the flavor is just very, very consistent. So we'd love to have you try it sometime. We'll have to work that out. Let's try a single barrel, cask strength. So I wanted to pull you a single barrel that was something you perhaps would be able to find. So we've done single barrels. I'd say we'd probably do single barrels 30, 40 times a year. Kind of a big pain in the ass, to be honest with you. These labels and just like trying to like get all the logo assets and make sure they fit into the thing, and that's always been a pain in my butt. But for our top accounts, like this is a total wine barrel. We do stuff with K&L Wines and Cask and Mission and High Times. What they do is they select through our barrels. They can choose through our barrels and choose a proof, whether it be cask strength, bottled and bond if it's over 4 years old, or just at regular strength. Majority of them never go down to regular strength. That sort of seems like a big no-no. But this is a cask strength one. This is a bourbon, and I like whiskey at cask strength because it's been that proof its entire existence. It's sat in a New Char American oak barrel at this proof. This one is 4 years old, so it has some 3 to 4 years old, right? So it has some good age behind it as well. And you know, the higher ABV, you can always add water or ice, and you can always drop it back down if you want to. I would say you can't take the water out when you put it in. So sometimes cask strength is really nice. It's kind of like hot sauce. Once it's in there, it's in there. So I'd love to get your take on it as well. I think they chose some good ones. And again, this is our wheated bourbon mash bill. So 70% corn, 25% wheat, 5% malted barley. The entry proof on this one was most likely right around 116, 118. And then obviously we're in Northern California, so we get a lot of water extraction and alcohol extraction sort of evenly. So we don't oftentimes see them too high or too low. So it's not like we put them in at 118, it's going to come out at 130. We're not very humid. You know, we're right near the coast, so we get a lot more of that really beautiful that wetness that helps us out a lot.
So what's your angel share? You said it stays.
Yeah,
about-
it's between 5 and 10% a year, depending. But unlike a lot of areas that lose a lot of water, we lose water and alcohol together, sort of at an even tilt. So, you know, it's a sort of blessing and a curse. But I do think, again, we get a lot of hot, cold days. You know, obviously Sonoma County goes all the way from 50s and 60s in the mornings, all the way up to 90s and 100s during the summer months, then back down to 50s and 60s in the afternoon. So that's good whiskey making weather. And I don't temperature control my rooms. I do have them insulated, so it sort of knocks off the extremes. It never gets above 100 and really never gets below 45, 40 degrees. So it never freezes. I'm not sure if you noticed or not, but when whiskey gets to freezing, it does not age. It sits there and does not do a single thing at freezing temperatures. So I like to think that we get 12 months a year of extraction. We don't necessarily go above 100, so you're not going to get that super crazy summers, but we're also going to be able to gauge a lot more balance on the lower side too. And this barrel should be live already at Total Wine. I believe we shipped it already. So if you happen to like it and you want to go pick it up, I believe you can go on there and purchase it. I did not check my notes beforehand, but I think it is available. Questions, comments, concerns? Sweet. Thanks, Eddie.
This is very classic bourbon. The front of the palate I wasn't loving because I felt like it was over oaked, but the more it sits, I like tongue, the more it's evolving, and I'm really digging it. You got tannins, you got wood, it's got sweetness. Very good. And this is your classic 30-25-5, right? Or 70-25.
70-25-5, correct. That's our in-house wheated bourbon mash bill. It is very similar to like a lot of the other big guys stuff out there on the wheated side. I mean, the only other one that's more than that typically is like the MGP mash bill, which goes up to 45%, 60-45-5. 55-45. What the hell is that? I know it's 45 on the wheat. I don't know the rest of the bar. To me, it's over 51%. So
I think it's 55-45-5.
That means
55-45-5.
but it can't be because that's too many numbers.
that makes 105.
Oh, that's
See, that's
right.
what
So-
that's why I caught myself on it. See, I know, crazy stuff. I don't know. I actually think it's probably 51-45-4, but it could be. We'll have to double check that at some point. I've never made it before. It's not really something I make. Though I drink the hell out of MGP whiskeys. Those things are delicious.
Yeah, the thing I love about this is when I first hit it, when it first took my first aroma, it felt a little hot in the nose. And when I took my first taste, it was hot. But that second taste, man, it gets smooth as could be. I mean, it's a beautiful bourbon. I like it a lot.
Thank you. And I think also too, again, one of the things that people sort of get stuck on or caught with us is that, you know, because we're using a traditional pot still, and this has never seen any sort of combination of column or not, you know, it's a bit more viscous and it has a bit more depth to it than a standard bourbon. And that's not ripping on columns. I have to, again, I'll be playing with a column a lot for the remainder of my career. I already have like a pot still on my arm, so I'm probably gonna need to get like a column at some point. But it's interesting because it just, you know, as the traditional bourbon drinkers are sort of used to are a very stylistic approach to bourbons. People who use pot stills to make bourbon, you know, myself and Balcones and a couple others, it's interesting to see sort of how people respond to something that tastes similar but also slightly different than like your standard bourbon. Cool. So let's jump into the smoked ones. So where to start? So years and years and years ago, when I first co-founded the distillery back in 2010, we were 1512 Spirits. That was our first company name. And I bought my old business partner out. He and I were ones who were home brewing and distilling. I bought him out in 2012, 13. And I changed the name. And one of the things that he and I experimented with back in the day was using Breeze. Breeze was making a cherrywood smoked barley that a lot of home brewers were like. There was a homebrew shop like right up the block from the distillery, so we'd drive up there and see all the cool new stuff they had, and we would always try and see if we could make some cool beer out of it. And we made some like smoked porters and smoked brown ales that were delicious. And one of the things that's really cool is that we started to get the cherrywood smoked barley. And when I bought him out, one of the things I thought would be really cool to do is actually start making my own. And so we actually smoke the cherrywood smoked barley on site. We have an old shipping container that we've turned into a smoker. Initially, it started as a little 4x4 smoke shed with some trays, and I put the trays in there. And then that's how I smoke my barley. And now we take a ton of grain at a time. We lay it in the bed of a shipping container, close it, apply the cherrywood smoke, and we do what's called a cold smoke. So we don't our goal is not to singe or burn the grains, but just to smoke the malted barley. Barley's already been malted. It comes to us fully malted. There's actually a malt house in the back of the building too. We don't use it as much anymore, but so we would take that malted barley in there. We would cold smoke it for a full week. We turn it every single day, and it brings you that beautiful, like dry, salted maraschino smoke into the grains. And so the bourbon, next one on our little tasting list, our cherrywood smoked bourbon, utilizes that cherrywood smoked malted barley.
Sorry, that was premature.
It's okay. What do you think of the truffles?
We'll do that later.
So this is a high rye bourbon as well, because I found that rye is a really good sort of a spice flavor affinity with smoke. 67% corn, 20% rye, 13% cherrywood smoked barley. So 67, 20, 13. And this is our smoked bourbon. And for me, right, you put maraschino in cocktails all day long, and people are doing now the smoked cocktails, which, you know, back when we started making this wasn't really as crazy. So if you want a smoked rye or smoked Manhattan, it's a great whiskey to try for that. I mean, I smoke a good cigar. If you like more like gamier meats, like venison or boar, this is a great one for that. A good ragu sauce would do really well with this. If you just like, you don't eat meat, you want to do like tomato sauce, a good Rayo's tomato sauce, and pasta would do super well with this too. And this is our smoked bourbon, which is 3, 4, and 5 years old. And then we put them all, we mash them all together in the new Char American oak barrels. Cheers, everybody. And those who like smoky scotches also might be a good liaison to that too, because sometimes people don't understand smoke. They like the mouthfeel of smoke, but sometimes peat can be just a little too iodine, seaweedy, salty. And so this one, I think, does hits different flavor parts. What y'all think? So if you get a couple thumbs up, I appreciate it.
You have any
Smoke
pictures
Manhattan.
of the smoking process and the smoking container? I've always been curious.
Yeah. So grains go into a super stack. We lay them on the bed of the shipping container, close the door, apply the smoke, which is basically a smoker we have on the side of it, built out of an old 50-gallon drum. Basically apply the wood in there. The smoke goes in, cold smokes the grains over the course of a full week. Every single morning, we turn those grains over and over and over again. 40 to 50 hours later of smoking, you've got a nice cherrywood smoked malted barley. Then you integrate those grains with the mash bill of 67% corn, 20% rye, 13% cherrywood smoked barley.
So are you sprouting the barley yourself? You're buying it?
The barley's already fully malted, already ready to rock and roll. In the traditional process of Scotland, obviously, as we all know, they'll take the wet grains, which will grab the smoke really, really nicely. And then as part of the kilning process, they'll typically go ahead and put some of that smoky element in there. I don't need to do that because the grains can grab the smoky flavor right without it. But I think it's really cool and different. And
So you're not
using
malting,
California.
so you're not malting the barley, you're buying malted barley.
We are buying malted barley. We have a malt house in the back of the building that we have bought some malted barley from before. It was a friend of mine founded it up. But it was just too small. I mean, we work with Admiral Malting for a lot of the stuff, which is based out of Alameda, California, kind of near St. George, or we get stuff from Breeze, but then we do the smoking ourselves.
Have you ever been tempted to throw a couple of racks of ribs in there?
Oh, I'm tempted all the time. And I wish there was like smell-o-vision too, because the smoker we use, it smells like, that beautiful, bacony barbecue that you could think of. The cool part for me, and we're for sale only in about 11 states right now, but we're in Missouri and I'm going to Michigan in like 2 weeks to do like a whiskey tasting at a smokehouse. So people are really gonna like have some fun and talk about food, and it lets a California boy like have a conversation with people who otherwise might be like, think I'm just a liberal from California, and we can talk about drink and eat and just like be merry. And so I don't know, I think it's cool to do, and I'm using California cherry trees, right? So I'm using a local smoke medium to also give this flavor that feels authentic because it's from my area. Stockton, California is technically where we get our cherry trees from, but then it's just, again, people have been messing with smoke or maraschino for a long time, so just put in the whiskey.
Very cool. So I'm Googling, I had you bookmarked in my Google Maps. So if we Google, if we're driving to Sonoma and we want to find your distillery, we shouldn't be looking for Sonoma Distillery. It would be Corning and Company, right?
Yep, both of them should work. Both of them should be in Rohnert Park, California. Unfortunately, we don't have a tasting room right now. We closed it down during COVID, and then the spaces got filled with shipping and receiving and boxes, and now we don't have a tasting room. And I don't know when the heck we're going to have one again. Also, we got moved out of the California Craft Distillers license because we produced over 100,000 gallons a year. So I can't sell bottles directly anymore either, which has been a big thorn in my butt. If you ever have an opportunity to support the California distilleries and want to sign on to any of these petitions to allow us to sell bottles directly, please do, because one of these days I'd love to be able to sell a bottle again. Not being a craft distillery either. So yeah, and just we grew up, I guess, or grew out. I see a question about visiting Oregon. We're not currently for sale in Oregon. It's on my to-do list. I really want to hit up and down the whole West Coast. Just haven't had a chance to do Oregon or Washington yet, but one day we will. And that'll be really fun. Sweet. Let's talk about cherrywood rye. People always say, like, what's your favorite whiskey? And I say, well, it's not really nice to have like a favorite, but this one happens, in my opinion, to sort of get the best grades and listens to me and doesn't yell at me like my children do. So this one is cool because it's the true story on this one. I opened a barrel of my straight rye once and it smelled like cherry soda. And I'm like, how the heck can I make a cherry soda whiskey? And so if you think about a cherry soda, right, you have all that beautiful like sarsaparilla, root beer spiciness. That's rye. And you have that really frothy vanilla note. That's wheat. And then we are already using the cherrywood smoked barley for our bourbon. But one of the things I found is on some test batches, when you go at or below 10% on the mash bill for the cherrywood smoke, it starts becoming more like a modifier in a cocktail, not meant to be like overly smoky. And so it's kind of like, oh shit, there's a maraschino in my glass, versus like, which the cherrywood smoked bourbon just feels like a sort of like a full palate smoke versus, you know, sort of mid palate versus full palate. And so this rye is 80% rye, 10% wheat, 10% cherrywood smoked barley, really meant to balance that smoke pretty nicely. I say the words, there are not other smoked ryes in the market. I'm sure there are some coming or some already there. I don't know, but I've never seen or tried another smoked rye out there. But that whole idea of being first is also sort of stupid, because I'm living in the shadows of very big distilleries and very long history of distillers. So cheers, cherrywood rye. For 5. Has all that nice herbaceousness I think about with rye. Killer in cocktails if you happen to make cocktails with rye whiskey. Does super well. This is on the shelf. We've been selling the cherrywood smoked bourbon and cherrywood rye, sort of in our core lineup, I guess you can call it, for some time. I would say that this is sort of like my tropical Skittles tasting kit versus my like red bag Skittles, the original Skittles. But you know, I think if you want something that tastes unique and different, and something that we make ourselves, this cherrywood rye is kind of cool. It should be available down south if you look for it at High Times and Mission Liquors and any other larger retailer down there. And if not, you can ask for it by name, and I would really appreciate that, because we're distributed through RNDC, so they could pick it up if they want.
Yeah, the herbaceousness is exactly what jumps out of the glass. You're absolutely right.
And this is on the shelf at like $49, typically $50. So it's not the most expensive bottle of whiskey. It's certainly not the cheapest. Our regular bourbon and rye are on the shelf usually about $40. So we have sort of like our $40 entry point, our $50 entry point, and then we have our black truffle coming up, which is $100. But
Do you know the usual price on the single barrel stuff?
yeah, so we try to line item with, if it's a regular strength one, with our normal product. But again, retailers can move stuff around. So, but if it's a bourbon that's at regular strength, it's about $40. If it's at cask strength, it usually should be around $50. So it's not a huge leap from our normal product lines. Cask strengths just tend to be about $10 more. So if our cherrywood expressions, you know, it should be $50 for the regular strength, and then cask strength should be $60. That's our targeted MSRPs. You know, again, people move stuff around a little bit, but yeah, I think the single barrels too is going to be really fun long term, because it's going to allow me a lot more exploration. I have a bunch of like port barrel finishes and cognac barrel finishes and sherry barrel finishes and a bunch of stuff currently in the works, that as I find more single barrel purchasers who want something like wine barrel finishes, they want some stuff that's different. I think we're making we'll have some cool offerings for them.
Did the single barrel that we tasted have a finish? I forget if you maybe said.
It is not. No, it's non-finished. It's our regular, just that cask strength. Yep. Just sold a barrel to Nugget, which I don't think there are any Nuggets down south, but it's one that I'm actually sad to lose. It's about 7 years old. I didn't realize how old it was. We tried to taste it blind. But it was right after the Giants won like their first World Series like 7 years ago or whatever. So I was like, oh, cool. I'll hold on to that barrel forever. And apparently he sold it. So, oops. Great. Let's talk about truffle. So, we make a black truffle rye whiskey. Why? So let's rewind like 7 years ago. I'm sitting up at a bar with a friend of mine who's running a bar program in Healdsburg at the Madrona Manor. And she and I were speaking about how I like to cook with mushrooms, especially freshly foraged mushrooms. Because I like sort of when you take the rye whiskey and you flambe it, and it brings out that umami, seaweedy saltiness of the mushroom, and the rye also sort of just has a nice flavor affinity. And she's like, "Oh, that's cool." She ran to the kitchen and she grabbed a little sliver of some truffles because it's a really high-end restaurant, and she threw it into a bottle of cask strength rye whiskey. She's like, "Let's see what happens." And 2 or 3 weeks later, she drove down to the distillery. She's like, "You got to try this shit. It's really good." And so, thank you, Pam. Pam's the goddess. But this is my rye, my standard rye whiskey mash bill, 100% rye, 80% unmalted, 20% rye malt. I do a blend of 3, 4, and 5-year-old as well. Next year, it's going to be 4, 5, and 6 years old. And we, I make a blend that is just a bit softer and more sort of like even balanced, even keeled, and not too spicy. And then I take fresh Perigord truffles from France. We fly them in, and they drink champagne on the way here. And then we shave them up, and we throw them into the rye whiskey in a tank for 6 months to a year. So a real long extraction. And so the question is there enough balance of truffle in there? The question is, do you like truffles? I guess we probably should ask that one first, because sometimes people are against the flavor of truffles. And unlike truffle salt or truffle oil, my goal is not to over truffle it either, right? Again, balance. And so I feel like this is the best we've done so far. I think it's the best reflection of what our black truffle is meant to be. There's a lot of flavor affinities between the spiciness of the rye and the black truffle itself. I tried using the Oregon truffle and the Australian truffle and the Italian. I just like the black Perigord because it's just of the floralness of it all and the damp earth that you get out of this flavor profile. And would love to get your take on it. And honesty is totally fine because, again, I feel like, you know, the flavored whiskey world, which I never really ever wanted to compete in, it's so vast now. And I think this is sort of meant to be sort of the polar antithesis of that, where it's like I'm physically putting $500 pound truffles into a whiskey. And I left the ABV high as well. I think this is at 96 proof, 95 proof. So it still has a pretty good amount of body on it as well.
Yeah, when I was labeling these, your ABVs were kind of 46 to 46 and a half on most of them. And that's like a weird, why not just keep it consistent? Why do you keep jumping up and down?
Well, I mean, being a craft producer, I feel like I get a little bit more liberty to do stuff like that. I guess, you know, craft still for a long time. Craft for life. I think it's cool to be able to find, I think, what the best balance of that whiskey at that particular proof. And while it would be easier to just sort of conform a standard proof across the board or across, you know, at least genres, I just found that the ABV tastes better at a half or 46 and a half or, you know, what have you. And so it gave my team gives me the latitude to be able to do that. So
I blame my team in the background for not reminding me to invite everyone on for turn on their cameras as we like to do our customary toast. I totally forgot because we're already on our last pour. I don't know how that happened, but we're gonna get Stacy to come back. Edgar, jump on. Anita, make yourself visible. There we go. Edgar's back. Yes, I'm gonna name call everyone. Corey, come back. I will give it another 3 seconds, but Adam, we want to thank you for being here tonight with us. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing this liquid with us and making delicious whiskey. Thanks to the group for being here, and cheers, everyone.
cheers.
All right, let's see. The polls are in. Let's see what people thought of the truffle rye. Everybody voted on this one? Everybody good? Thumbs up? Everyone voted? Cool. All right. I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised, Adam. 87% love it.
Sweet. Thank you. I mean, I think it's, please share with your friends, tell them it's out there. I mean, it started, I'll have a whole bottle, like kind of where it started. It was like these little tiny 375 bottles. We used to sell these for like $80 a bottle. Now it's at $100 a bottle. You know, we did only like 250 cases this year, I believe. So it's not meant to be a very large release on an annual basis. But, you know, for me, you know, dried steaks, blue cheese, chopped salad, a good cigar. I keep on saying cigars, but you know, that's my jam of these. That's where I would, you know, sort of hit the flavor affinities on here too. Asparagus with some cheese and black pepper would be great too. But yeah, I appreciate the thumbs up. Definitely continue to hold me accountable and ask good questions. If you haven't already, if you want to follow us at Sonoma Whiskey on Instagram and Facebook, we would love to have you continue to like follow our journey, because we're constantly doing updates on stuff and things and our process and behind the scenes that I couldn't necessarily do on there. Yeah, it's a good question about where you can get out of Cal State. So I mean, I'd say that K&L Wines is a good one for that one too. I think the Mission Liquors, I'm not sure if Mission Liquors is just outside. Nestor's another big one too that has shipped for us. We sometimes make these little 4-packs, which are like our little gift sets. Do I have a 4-pack somewhere? Probably. I don't have a 4-pack here, but yeah, we sell these little introductory packs. If you go to Nestor, actually, you can see we have a little virtual tasting kit too. So if you want to gift someone to your friend, it comes with a little Glencairn glass and some of the grains that we use, including cherry and smoke. So it's a nice way to educate people. And there's a little QR code on there. You can scan it and go to an actual tasting, a virtual tasting that I recorded.
Does it Zoom take you to our last tasting we did with you? I can give you that YouTube link so you can redirect it.
So yeah, that works.
Hey Jim, you got a question?
Yeah, this is a sort of one-on-one question, but Adam, I'm going to be down in California in October, and I would love to get together and do a tasting or something. And Vadim has my email address. He's welcome to give it to you. And if we could hook up and somehow get that to happen, my wife and I will be down there.
So I just sent my email address to everybody here. So if y'all ever find yourself in the San Francisco Bay Area, say hi. I'm mostly there Mondays or Fridays. That's my only sort of cutoff, just because I've now given myself a weekend to be with the kids. But if y'all would like to email me, no hate mail, but anything else would be great. Totally happy to do that, and would love to show you around if you're in the area when I can accommodate. In lieu of having a tasting room, one of these days I really cannot wait to get more. I think it'd be more visibility, more people. We do have a club that we have that sort of gives you first crack at our stuff. It's non-obligation club. We can't sell bottles directly, but if you go to our website, you should go on there and take a look at that, because it's kind of cool to join a club. And we have, not this year, but next year, most likely doing a maybe a bourbon cream, which has been requested of us. Our single malt's going to come out soon too. I'm not sure it's going to come out this year, but it's been something I lose actual sleep over at night, just because of just the amount of history in single malt and wanting to do it right, and wanting to be respectful of the category. It's my 25% Scottish roots just, yelling at me at night. So yeah, we have a single malt most likely coming out this year too. And so the club will be a great place to sort of see a first release. And again, as Stacy posted on there, we ship to 40 states. So our club members will be able to receive bottles inside the state too. You could go through our retailers.
Said the magic word. You beat me to the question. I was going to ask about single malt. Right now it's on fire. I'm loving it. Are you? What's the plan? Are you doing all just regular malted barley? Or going to do like a malted and a smoked? Or?
So the first edition of our single malt is going to be a very traditional one, very, very Highland-esque, used barrels, used bourbon barrels. Right now it's about 4 or 5 years old. I have some of it aging in used port casks as well. So it's gonna be a blend of used bourbon barrels and some used port barrels. And you know, the reason this is you know, not to have my moment on my therapist chair, but like the challenge with making whiskey is that like you sometimes have to make whiskey that other people like, not just you like, right? And so like I made a single malt the way that I would drink it, and I'm of the belief, you know, like I'm of the belief that I like single malts that are just like far more coastal and they have that like saline saltiness to them. And you know, I just wanted to make something that tasted like the sea, and so I did. And so for those who know that in that context, I think you're really going to dig it. It doesn't have any smokiness to it at all yet, but another edition down the road will in time. And so just keep on keeping on with us, because that's stuff that we're working on, and I really respect that category.
Awesome. I think everyone has voted on their favorite expression. Did you vote on yours, Adam?
I did not. I mean, I love all my children equally. But yeah, I'll put my vote in. Voted.
All right. I'm gonna end the poll, and you get to vote, or you get to guess what you think the group's favorite expression was tonight.
I think it was a single barrel cask strength.
Results are, to your surprise and mine, 35% of the group voted for the Sherwood bourbon. We got 6 votes for the Sherwood bourbon. I spelled it wrong. It's Cherrywood. My apologies, not
That's
Sherwood.
okay. I want to say nothing.
Cherrywood bourbon. You all knew what I was talking about. Second place with 5 votes is Black Truffle, and then third place is the Maple and the single cask tied together. Third place. That's impressive.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny too, because when I do tastings, the wheat tends to be the one, but I usually put the wheat at the end after everyone's already done all the more aggressive, you know, more full body things. And the wheat just becomes like a breath of fresh air because like it's just so light in body. But because I put it at the front, I don't know if that changes people's perspective. I do think it's interesting that on its own 2 feet, it's the lightest thing we make. And I think, you know, on a whiskey sour or what have you, if you have any more left over and you want a cocktail with it, the 2 I would look at would be like a whiskey sour or a Brooklyn cocktail. If you ever wanted to like play around a little bit, Brooklyn's sort of a adaptation, obviously, on a Manhattan. So give that a try if you're looking to taste through some of the bottle you have left.
You want to tell us about the Brooklyn? I know that's a
Yeah. So it's a combination of wheat whiskey, my wheat, but oftentimes use a bourbon. And then you go ahead and put pecan bitters in there. So it has a little bit more of that nuttiness in there. And then sweet and dry vermouth is usually sort of equal parts sweet and dry vermouth. And so it's meant to, again, be sort of like a Manhattan, but just a little different.
It's like a perfect Manhattan, I guess. Sounds good.
I really, really appreciate everybody's time. Obviously, I recognize it's like Friday afternoon, Friday evening at this point, and would love to say hi again. You know, especially as we have maybe when we roll out the Old Quaker, we can do an Old Quaker tasting at some point. And you know, the one exciting thing about our product that's going to probably happen in the not too distant future is I had a choice, and I'd be interested to get everybody's sort of feedback on this. I had a choice. So when the continuous column still gets installed, the plan was to roll out in about 4 years some of the stuff that comes out of that to go into our whiskeys to sort of bring the flavor back home to what the American palate is used to. And so my bourbon and my rye in particular are ones that are going to go through a metamorphosis. And so we're going to start blending in some source whiskey for like our bourbon and our rye soon, because I wanted to bring you that flavor profile now versus waiting 4 years to do it for you. And so we're in the next couple months, you'll start to see some changes. Our straight bourbon is going to turn into California bourbon. and our straight rye is going to turn into California rye. It's all a blend of, it's all be minimum of 3 years old. The rye is going to be 4, but it will allow our products to sort of shape up. And the cool part is the majority of it is California grown still. It's still well over 50% stuff we make in house, but you start to get a chance to taste some of the products that we make. So we will be making and re-releasing in 4 years. So look forward to getting everybody's take on that. That's a metamorphosis our brand is going through soon. It's subtle, but enough that you'll start to see. I sort of like the California wheat, so California bourbon, California rye, some California smoked bourbon, California smoked rye. Those will all come out. Those smoked ones are still remaining all 100% grain to glass to start. And then we're introducing a new product this year called California smoked whiskey, which is a much more smokier version of it's actually a boar rye in its body, but it's a bourbon. It's a 21% high rye bourbon from MGP and my cherrywood rye, the two of them together. And I found some barrels that were just smoky beyond belief, and I was like, it'd be really cool if I made a boar rye and actually balance that smoke. And so that product's going to come out fairly soon too. So yeah, this is going to be stuff to keep on the Instagrams about and all that.
So you're saying you're going to start sourcing and blending yours with MGP.
It's not just MGP, it's actually MGP, Willet, Green River, and a couple other spots that we've been messing with. But yes, it's gonna the straight bourbon and straight rye are gonna start blending. Are gonna be the first ones to really start getting blended, with the intention of showcasing what the flavor profile is gonna taste like in 4 years today, just so we can, over the course of the next 4 years, it'll allow you to sort of have a synchronicity between what we're gonna do in 4 years from now.
Because you're moving away from 100% pot still to a column still.
For those products. Yeah, especially on the straight bourbon, I think it's going to be really helpful for it too. It also allows me to start blending in some high rye bourbon as well to bring in some of that balance to the bourbon, to not just move away from the wheated, but also have some high rye influence in there too.
You're essentially doing the reverse of what usually people start with blend with.
Yeah, I know.
Do their own.
Yeah, well, I think some of that is just gated by the fact that I think the palate is going to change, and I have a choice to sort of fall off a cliff in 4 years from now, and then all of a sudden people are just like, oh, he made a change, or I can start integrating it sooner. And so I chose to do that. But since I'm staying true to the fact the majority of the stuff is still house made, and it's going to be in smaller parts of it, I don't think it's going to be a huge difference. It's just enough that it's worth sort of celebrating and letting you guys know it's happening. So you'll start to see those bottles with the California bourbon and California rye soon.
So what you're saying is you should stock up on your stuff now so you can compare it what it's going to be.
I think it'd be interesting to have you try it side by side, really. Try the straight rye next to the California rye and the straight bourbon next to the California bourbon, and see which one you like more. I would bet you that you're probably going to like each of them sort of individually and differently, because they're just different styles of whiskey. And I think as time goes on, we'll probably have some SKUs that will just be 100% pot distilled, some that will be 100% column distilled, eventually some that'll be a blend of the two. So that's going to be the real exciting part about having the sort of Willy Wonka style approach to stuff, is I'll just have a little bit of everything being made in-house.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for your time.
I think I see Jason unmuted himself. He's always got really good questions.
I was just wondering, you were talking about smoking the other one. Corn is awful at absorbing smoke, but have you ever tried to do it with either the wheat or the rye grains themselves? It's just because they tend to be able to absorb flavors and things better than corn's ever going to get a smokier, super smoked version.
It's a good question. I have not. It'd be worth trying at some point. I just know because the kernels of the barley are just so much larger.
Yeah.
It just absorbs it super easy, especially because of the obviously the kilning that already occurred on the grains too. It's so much more susceptible to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's cool because there are other people who've done like smoked, corn whiskeys and stuff like that too, that don't really have the influence of the barley on there, and they actually do smoke some corn, which to your point is not super easy to do, but it might be something we pursue in the future.
Cool. And then I just bought a ticket. I'm the one weirdo in this group that's actually in Michigan, so I just bought a ticket to the tasting you're doing in a couple weeks.
Oh, at the smokehouse or at
Yeah.
which one? Dude, that's gonna be so freaking cool. I mean, it's like the dinner, they've been brining some of the meat because it's like a big huge smokehouse with my bourbon like a month ago. So they started that brine process a month ago. So they're doing like a wet brine on that. And then the dinner looks amazing. And it's like, I mean, they're expecting between 75 and 100 people, which is not usually my preference, but it's gonna be like a big outside tent with a speaker system. So I'll see you there. I've never been there before either. So I've never been to Michigan. So look forward to taking that off the list.
Damn, Jason, I don't think I've ever been this jealous of you.
Yeah,
be a
something
freaking
good
cool
happened
dinner.
in Michigan for once.
You're gonna rub it in, buddy.
Well, we're gonna try and do a Southern California dinner at some point. And not just sort of like tit for tat, but just because like we had one on the books that actually got canceled by the host at one point. So we're gonna try and get something else reworked up. And as soon as I do, I'll let you all know about it. So if you're interested in attending, we'd love to meet some of you in person, and then certainly also see what the chefs do with our whiskey, because that's such a fun thing. I try to do a dozen or so of those a year, and I just find them to be really, really creative.
Yeah, for sure. My buddy did he featured Sonoma and did a brisket, and it was really, really good. Yeah, next time you're in LA, hit me up. We'll set something up. We'll do a dinner. Barbecue
great.
and brisket goes really well together. Test it.
I agree. Anybody have any questions? Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Happy Friday.
Thanks, Adam. Cheers.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, y'all. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.